This graph, this home market production, producing it in the USA, and how do we get it into the Russian market. And I like this graph because if you've had an opportunity to read the report, there's about 10 pages focused on market entry, but I think this graph really sums it up nicely. So under that home market production, producing them in the US, we have the two methods of direct and indirect export. Now, when we looked at the indirect export side, we really just found that it was costly. There are a lot of legal issues setting up the legal entity. Would have been very complex. So we really focused on the left side, that direct export. And each one had its own pros and cons. But we really felt like the sales agent, going through a sales agent was the best way to go. And the big pros for that were that you already had trained employees, they had good local market expertise, they had the good relationships with the customers existing, hopefully, if you choose the right sales agent. But the big con was service. You're selling a product. Who would take this product? It's service intensive. What if it breaks down? What if there are issues? Who's responsible for that? Is it Svalin or is it that local sales agent? So that was one of the big issues we were concerned about. And then also, obviously, exporting the truck into Russia would be very costly, very expensive. So we then focused, even though they said they wanted to focus on the home market production, we also looked at the foreign production. There were some pros and cons there as well. Licensing, this again is proprietary technology. There's a lot of patent issues, concerns. Do you want to give this proprietary knowledge to a Russian company? That's an extreme risk. Lack of support, cultural issues, cultural clashes that could happen doing business with a foreign company, and then also how to structure the contract. How to terminate it if things aren't working out, how to set that up legally. However, now that I've bashed foreign production, I do want to say that our recommended mode of entry is actually to do a joint venture. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Svalin wants to get into this market fast. They want access. There are a lot of companies over there that can have the speed and access to get them in pretty quickly. It also lowers their risk. They're sharing that. They're sharing it with another company. They have increased leverage, financial leverage, relationships. So what are some of the companies that they could do a JV with? Really, there's the complement technologies. So a company, Propant is a technology that goes hand in hand with fracturing. So you fracture, you create these fractures, and then you need something to hold them up. And Propant is actually, it's a gas, a hydrogen compound, I believe, that goes in there and keeps those fracks existing. So there's a company called Carbo Ceramics that's already doing a lot of business, has a lot of relationships in Russia, would be a good person to partner up with. And then there's also the bigger companies, like Sarah mentioned, Halliburton, for example, that have these government contracts that they could go in and partner up with as well. So we recommend the joint venture. That's the how. Now I want to turn it over to Dave, who's going to go through the suggested marketing mix.
Due to the overall small volume of fracturing trucks that Svalin's planning on making, as well as there's a large competition, and they're also looking at going into these extreme environments. So in Siberia, where their fracturing truck is really going to be useful because they're going to be able to cut right through the ice, so they're able to heat the water faster than anybody else. They're really going to require a non-traditional marketing mix to enter the market. One of their keys that they're going to need to focus on is a very strong brand, just in general, entering in Russia. Russians are very nationalistic, and they oftentimes, especially with a market like oil, they don't like to see other companies come in and dominate this market. They're more okay with other companies coming in and facilitating, the strong Russian bear, as it is, and seeing them build out these other companies rather than taking over and replacing their proprietary companies. In general, their pricing, they told us that they were looking to sell their products for about $300,000. However, the production costs are about $180,000, so there's a good margin in there. But some of the remanufactured products that exist, companies here in the States are taking these old frac trucks and customizing them, remanufacturing them, or they're selling them for about $450,000 to $500,000. So one of our key recommendations is to increase that price point because they can compete on that same remanufactured product, as well as they can come in and still have even a higher margin. So as I mentioned, one of the keys they're going to have to focus on is alternate forms of promotion. That's going to be their success. In general, they're looking to produce 5 to 8, maybe 7 of these frac trucks a year. So a broad marketing strategy of advertising throughout the United States and Russia really isn't relevant. So what we'd like to see them focus on is their industry and trade publications. We've identified 10 key industry trade publications that everybody who's anybody in the industry reads. It's a couple different ways that they can work with these particular publications. Include traditional advertising, segmented on those people that are operating in the Siberian place that really need these fracturing trucks. But these ads can run $10,000 per run. If you go in and you rerun them over a course of multiple months publication, you can get the cost down by about 30%. But again, they're looking to produce maybe 6 or 8 of these a year. $10,000 an ad may not be the most cost-effective route. So what we did is we looked into some alternate forms that they can leverage these trade publications. One of them being sanctioning and then both submitting academic articles that promote the concept of fracturing in the Siberian marketplace. A lot of these trade publications have the ability for you to submit vetted academic articles that were written through a university. So they could provide some money to some of these universities, sanction this, and you could get a little double dipping. You don't want to necessarily mention Svalin throughout the entire publication, but they can be mentioned as well as their competitors, and that'll at least get some exposure on their product. Another way is just purchasing an ad in one of these articles, which can be a little bit less expensive if you're providing them content for an article, as opposed to just a one-page advertisement. Sometimes these advertised articles could be 2 to 3 pages, talking about your product or service from the academic standpoint, and you kind of key in, but at the bottom is a little disclaimer that says, well, this was an advertisement. The publisher does not necessarily agree with what was placed here. This is an ad. So the published articles, and then lastly, seeking coverage in specific publications. A lot of these journalists are looking for content perpetually. So if you can highlight needs for other industries, highlight problems that certain of these service companies are having, and then you can leverage relationships you can build with some of these journalists, they'll highlight the problems that you solve, and then also likely mention you and possibly your competitors. But again, if they're looking to sell 6 of these a year, to any kind of coverage, and beginning that conversation will help. Also, Svalin already has significant, due to their oil and gas trading company, significant connections within the Russian government, Russian oil companies, the larger side, as well as from the American standpoint. So this is something they mentioned they don't want to necessarily get into at first to exhaust these connections they have, but it is definitely a route that they can take. Also, there are, I found, over 10 trade shows and events that take place every year that get 30,000 or more visitors to come and look at the new trends that are going on within the oil and gas, within oil and gas as an industry. So what they should do is they should begin going to these, attending them first, and then the booths can be very expensive, anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 to at least to have a booth at some of these events. But within time, as they begin to grow their market, they can take that route. Otherwise, they can go and simply pass out their guerrilla marketing, pass out their business cards, talk to the service companies that probably have booths about the solutions that they can bring them. Lastly, as we mentioned earlier, there's very little information about fracturing specifically in the target market of Siberia. And so what we were thinking is approaching another academic resource or doing that on their own and actually creating a place on the internet that actually talks about this. And from there, once this is built, if you can mention Svalin, linking through all the different search engines, you'll begin to come up as people search for fracturing in Siberia. They'll come up as a search result. In the actual marketing plan that we developed, we identified the key search engines that they could do some traditional advertising, but also focus on how you put yourself at the top of their search results to make sure that once your web presence is built, that you're also being brought up on searches as people are looking for this information. And lastly, kind of based on that same web presence, as you develop this knowledge base and encourage people to talk about this, you will then begin to position yourself as a leader in the industry and leading discussions. You're bringing this information about fracturing in